So every year, as part of the Haggadah, we read the whole dor v'dor chayav adam lerot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim, which means don't mumble. Barbara, nice and loud. What does it mean? Not that part. That's a separate part. This is in every generation, Sharon.
A person must teach his children.
Lirot et atzmo, must see themselves ke'ilu. Thank you. So it's not as if we were a slave in Egypt, but rather as if we left Egypt. Right? Every generation, we should see ourselves. A person should see themselves as if they left Egypt. So what does that mean when we say that? What does it mean that we say at the seder tables when we're celebrating our freedom, that in every generation we should see ourselves as if we left Egypt?
Put ourselves in the shoes of those who left Egypt.
All right, so we should put ourselves in the shoes of those who left Egypt. Right? In some ways, we do that with all the aspects of the seder, right? We have the mortar-like haroset, we have the saltwater taste in our tears that are meant to represent the salt water. We have the matzah that didn't rise, right? The maror, the bitterness of the maror. But what does it really mean that we should see ourselves as if we left Egypt? Should appreciate freedom.
It means that even as the generation, as time goes by, the impact that the Exodus had on us is unchanged.
The impact that the Exodus had on us is unchanged. That's the goal, right? But you said, even as time goes by. We're taught that Yitziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus, is the greatest of miracles. Right? It's the greatest miracle that God has ever done for Jewish people, for humanity. And we can talk about what that miracle itself was. Was it the splitting of the sea itself? Rambam says, by the way, that the miracle was not that the sea of reed split, but rather that it was the miracle happened at the exact moment we needed it to happen, when we were at the edge of the sea before Paro's army caught up to us, enclosed at the exact time we wanted it and needed it to happen, after we crossed the sea into freedom, before Pharaoh's army was able to cross the sea as well. So the miracle itself wasn't necessarily that the sea split, but the miracle was that it happened when we wanted it, when we needed it to happen. But that's part of Yitziat Mitzrayim, right? Is the miracle the splitting of the sea, or is the miracle freedom? Why else do we say in every generation we should see ourselves as if we left Egypt? Josh?
Well, there's a midrash that I think it's only a fifth of the Jews actually left. If you look at it that way, I would say, well, when I try to put myself in the shoes and say, which side would I come?
Right, so not all, right, there's some who say that not all of Bnei Israel left. Right? The 10th plague was the only plague in which we actually had to do something. Right? We had to act. All the other plagues before that, the 9 plagues were taught, did not affect Bnei Israel. They affected just the Egyptians, did not affect us. But in order for the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, to not affect us, we had to take that blood and put on our doorposts as a sign of our commitment, our faith, our belief in God. Not only did not all Bnei Israel, some would argue, leave, but we also know that there was this Erev Rav, there were those besides Bnei Israel that showed their either they showed their faith in God, or they were finally willing to stand up to Paro, and they were willing to leave as well. To me, this idea that Yitziat Mitzrayim is the greatest of miracles, and we have to see ourselves as if we experienced this greatest of miracles, is a statement by the rabbis about the decreasing faith among humanity and God in this relationship. Because it would be great if our Torah reading that Lori so beautifully chanted Shira Hayam for us ended right at that moment. Right? It would make sense. We celebrate splitting of the sea, we celebrate freedom, we cross, we sing, we give thanks, but that's not where our Torah reading ends this morning. What happens immediately after Miriam takes timbrel in her hand and everybody sings and dances? literally the next passage, the next verse, what happens? We start fetching. Jonathan? Right, there was bitter water. Immediately, after we've experienced freedom, we return to, we don't have water to drink, we don't have food to eat. Soon after that, we say, actually, it was better when we were slaves in Egypt. How quickly we forget. And I worry that that is human instinct to focus on what was, maybe how much better it was, and to forget the blessings of our lives today. So when we say, B'chol dor v'dor chayav adam lir'ot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatzah mitzrayim, we're actually not saying that we should see ourselves as if we left Egypt. What we're saying, because we reenact that, right? We reenact what it was like, the labors of slavery in Egypt. We reenact freedom. We sing, we celebrate, we eat. What we're saying is that we need to see ourselves in experiencing God's miracles as well. My fear in saying that this was the greatest miracle that God ever did is that what we're setting ourselves up for, theologically, is that everything's downhill from there. And when we live in the world that we live in, when we live in the midst of war, we live in a rise of authoritarianism in our country, it's a threat to society, right? It's easy for us, it's human instinct to focus on the darkness, the cloud of darkness which we feel so present in this world. And when we do that, we forget how to take a step back and still focus on the miracles that we have experienced, the miracles that we continue to experience. And maybe it's guilt, right? When there are those who are experiencing true pain and suffering, how is it fair with the privilege that we have to take a step back and give thanks? Right? How can we chant Hallel at our seder tables and give thanks when there are those who are experiencing pain and suffering? And yet, it's all the more necessary at times of darkness for us to still appreciate the blessings in our lives, to still experience the miracles in our lives. Using Rambam's definition, those that without which they did not happen at the time we needed them to happen, our lives would be forever different and forever altered. Because if we can't appreciate the miracles in our lives, then frankly, what is the purpose in waking up every morning? Because we wake up every morning to give thanks for living our lives, and striving to make this world better for others, for our children, for our grandchildren, for ourselves. But in order to do that, we still need to pause and say, Hodu Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chasto. And so, I believe when we say, B'chol dor v'dor chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatzah mitzrayim, it's not about reenacting the Exodus. Right? What we read wasn't the crossing of the sea as much as what we focus on was our reaction to the crossing of the sea. Right? That's what we sing and celebrate. What we focus on is Moshe and Miriam singing songs of praise after we've crossed the sea. What we focus on in our text is not the act of crossing from slavery to freedom as much as it's our reflection, our gratitude, our praise for the miracles that we have experienced. And so that is my hope and prayer for all of us. To use these words as a charge, less about experiencing the Exodus itself, and more about experiencing the miracles in our lives. Those moments when we have left the narrow places, which often, way too often, keep us enslaved, and are able to still understanding the cloud of darkness around us. Find opportunities to give thanks to God, to see God's miracles in the eyes of our loved ones, each and every day in this world that we live in. Because once we see those miracles in our lives, then we're able to help others find miracles in their lives as well. Amen.